Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Game of Thrones video on how Littlefinger's gift to Lady Olenna is Lancel Lannister. First off, I have to give a spoiler warning for Game of Thrones up to Season 5. So this video is about a scene in Season 5 in which Littlefinger tells Lady Olenna he has a gift for her and all the speculation thereafter of who he meant by this. Now, this is something that I've already talked about at length in several of my videos. However, I have yet to make a single video where I spell out all of the evidence as to why Lancel Lannister was the gift that Littlefinger was referring to, and also examine the flaws in the more popular theory that the gift he was referring to was Gendry. I know this is kind of old news since it concerns an episode that aired almost a year ago. However, to this point, there is still a lot of confusion involving this scene, and the theory that Gendry was the gift that Littlefinger was referring to is still a very popular one, even though that this is a theory based on a misconception on what has already occurred in the Season 5 episode, The Gift. So let us start first by rewatching the scene in question.
Cersei summoned me to King's Landing. I dared not refuse her.
And what did she want?
Piece of information she knew that I had. Neither silence nor lies were an option. But I have other information, of which she is unaware. And as you say, our interests are aligned. I have a gift for you.
What kind of gift?
The same kind I gave Cersei. A handsome young man.
Now, I will admit that this scene is kind of vague, and I can understand why people might be a little confused or thrown off by it, but let's start by looking at the first part, because Littlefinger refers to a gift he gave Cersei and says he has the same kind of gift for Lady Olenna, and that gift is a handsome young man. At the time this episode aired, there was a lot of confusion and speculation on who both of these gifts were. However, I think it's pretty widely accepted by now that the gift Littlefinger gave to Cersei was Olyvar. The man who implicated Loras and Margaery has lying about Loras' relationship with him in order to get them both arrested. As Littlefinger refers to information Cersei knew he had that she wanted, and since we know she was behind getting Loras arrested, it's obvious she used Olyvar to do so. But Olyvar is Littlefinger's man, which is why she asked Littlefinger to return to King's Landing so she could use his man against the Tyrells. Now, this much has already been confirmed by writer Brian Cogman in the DVD commentaries for episode 6, where he stated that the letters Cersei sent Littlefinger were about her using Olyvar against the Tyrells, so it's pretty much confirmed by the writers themselves that Littlefinger's gift to Cersei was Olyvar. And as I said, this is pretty widely accepted nowadays. There were still some who contested this at the time and believed Olyvar possibly to be his gift to Lady Olenna, but clearly this isn't the case. Olyvar was Littlefinger's gift to Cersei. So then, who did Littlefinger mean as his gift to Lady Olenna? Well, to me, the answer is as plain as day, as the next scene in the episode after Littlefinger mentions the gift is a scene where Tyrion meets Daenerys, and the very next scene after that is where Cersei visits Baelor Sept and has a conversation with the High Sparrow. A conversation that ends with the High Sparrow revealing that Lancel has told him about her affair and her actions in helping to kill King Robert, and promptly has her arrested for it. So in one scene, Littlefinger and Lady Olenna plot to take down Cersei, and in the very next time we return to King's Landing, we see Cersei being arrested by the Faith Militant. So it seems quite self-evident to me that these two scenes are directly related, and it was Lady Olenna and Littlefinger's plotting that was responsible for Cersei's downfall. After all, that's what they were talking about, wasn't it? So it seems like an open and shut case to me, but apparently not. Apparently many others don't find this as self-evident as I do, and the main thing that threw them off that these two scenes were related was this scene from episode 1 of season 5.
Your wounds from the Blackwater seem to have healed.
It wasn't my wounds that needed healing.
What can I do for you?
you can forgive me.
What could you possibly have done to warrant my forgiveness?
I led you into the darkness.
I doubt you've ever led anyone anywhere.
I tempted you into our unnatural relations. And of course, there was the king. His boar hunt. His wine.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm a different person now. I found peace in the light of the Seven. You can too. They watch over all of us, ready to dole out mercy or justice. Their world is at hand. I will pray for your father's soul.
The day Tywin Lannister's soul needs your help.
Now, many people interpret this scene as meaning that Lancel had already confessed to the High Sparrow about his relations with Cersei, so that in episode 7, when the High Sparrow arrests Cersei for her relations with Lancel, many people assumed that Lancel had already told the High Sparrow about this before season 5 even began. Many people citing that Lancel confessed his sins. However, we just watched this scene. Never anywhere in this scene did Lancel say he confessed his sins to the High Sparrow. He didn't even say he confessed his sins in general, let alone specifically saying he mentioned anything about his relations with Cersei to anyone. He simply said he wanted to apologize to her for those relations, and Cersei replied with, "I don't know what you're talking about," because she doesn't even want to acknowledge that this occurred. And Lancel's reply is to tell her he's a new man now. So in other words, never anywhere in the scene did he even remotely imply that he told anyone about his relations with Cersei. In fact, even before episode 7 aired, I saw many people, who had this misconception that Lancel had already told the High Sparrow about what Cersei did, and they were just waiting for him to arrest her. But in fact, that was a leap that they took all on their own. And I was even at this time, trying to point out that this was a misconception, that never anywhere was it stated that Lancel told anyone anything. However, this isn't the only scene Lancel appeared before episode 7, so let us look at some other scenes. Has this one in episode 6, where we see Lancel and Littlefinger together.
Lord Baelish.
Yes. Lancel Lannister.
Brother Lancel. We abandon our family names.
It's quite a family to abandon.
The city has changed since you were here last. We flooded the gutters with wine, smashed the false idols, and set the godless on the run.
Well done. I'm here on urgent business for the Queen, Mother. Should I send word that I'll be delayed?
Step carefully, Lord Baelish. You'll find there's little tolerance for flesh peddlers in the new King's Landing.
We both peddle fantasies, Brother Lancel. Mine just happened to be entertaining.
Again, absolutely no mention of a confession or his relationship with Cersei. However, this scene is relevant in foreshadowing that Lancel was the gift to Lady Olenna that Littlefinger was referring to, but I'll get more into that a tad bit later. For now, let's also watch the scene where the High Sparrow arrests Cersei to see if this indicates that Lancel had already confessed his sins to him a long time ago.
A young man came to us not long ago, broken in body and spirit. He had so much to strip away, so much weighing him down. But piece by piece, he unburdened himself. Let go of vanity, pride, sin, Now his soul is so light, he will float through the 7 heavens like a bird. And he has much to say about you.
He never said that Lancel had specifically confessed his sins regarding Cersei a long time ago. He made a vague reference about Lancel unburdening himself, but he gave no indication on what this entails, and he gave no time frame on that unburdening. It could have happened a year ago or an hour ago, so this again is no indication that Lancel had already confessed to him about his relationship with Cersei. So now that I've clearly established that there's absolutely nothing in the show to indicate that Lancel had already confessed his relations with Cersei to anyone, let alone the High Sparrow, let me now go further to explain that if the High Sparrow already knew about Cersei's actions with Lancel and simply sat on it for all this time that he appeared on screen, it would completely go against his character, as he's been clearly established. Because the High Sparrow hasn't been portrayed as the type to use information for political gain. Rather, he is a religious zealot who is sincere in his beliefs. Therefore, his own ethical code would dictate that he punish a sinner as soon as he learned of it. To simply sit on this information for personal gain would in itself be a sin and defy his personal code. But don't just take my word for this, that the High Sparrow was sincere in his beliefs. Let's hear it straight from the showrunners and the actor who portrayed him.
I'm driven solely by faith. Yeah, I have very honest and honorable intentions in everything I do.
Which of course makes other people in the show distrust him even more, because they can't believe that anyone would actually be honest. Everyone's playing some kind of secret game.
Hypocrisy is a boil. Lancing a boil is never pleasant.
So there you hear directly from one of the showrunners himself say that the High Sparrow does not play secret games, which would directly eliminate the possibility of him sitting on this information for personal gain. Therefore, it is pretty much confirmed that the High Sparrow did not know about Cersei's crimes until shortly before her arrest. So we have a scene where Littlefinger and Lady Olenna plot to take down Cersei. In the very next scene in King's Landing, we see Cersei getting arrested. So it's plain to see they had a hand in it, and that hand was to get Lancel to tell the High Sparrow about Cersei's sins, though so he could arrest her. Now, how Littlefinger and Lady Olenna got Lancel to confess is still a mystery, as it was not shown on screen. However, it's as plain as day that they did somehow get him to do it. However, to further state my case, let's examine the previously on segment for episode 7, The Gift, because every episode begins with a previously on segment that is meant to get viewers caught up on past events in the show that are relevant to the episode about to air. In fact, some complain that these segments can sometimes be very spoily, as you see, if you see a character in the previously on segment that you haven't seen in a while, is a good bet that that character will either appear or at least be mentioned. Examples of this is when Pollivar appeared in the 4th season premiere where Arya killed him. He was shown in the previously on segment, and when Tyrion told Jorah about his father's death in episode 5, they showed his father meet with Tyrion and then his father's death on the previously on segment. And only scenes that are relevant to the episode about to air are ever showed on the previously on segment. So let us now watch the previously on segment for episode 7, The Gift, and see if we can pick up on any clues.
Did you kill Joffrey?
That was something my new friends wanted very badly.
You don't think I'd let you marry that beast, do you?
We engaged in intimate relations. Queen Marjorie walked in on us.
There is enough evidence to bring a formal trial for Sir Loras and Queen Marjorie. Take her.
Lancel Lannister.
Brother Lancel. We abandon our family names.
Quite a family to abandon.
So it starts off with a reminder that Littlefinger had plotted with Lady Olenna to assassinate Joffrey, a fact that is brought up again in this episode when Lady Olenna and Littlefinger meet. Then they show Oliver implicate Loras and Marjorie to the High Sparrow, which got them both arrested, which again is very relevant to this episode because it shows Loras and Marjorie are arrested, which is what Lady Olenna mainly fights against in this episode. And of course, that Oliver was used to do so, which, as I pointed out, is relevant because he was Littlefinger's gift to Cersei. And then the next scene they show is the scene where Lancel meets with Cersei about their past dealings to show that Lancel had already told the High Sparrow about her crimes. Oh, wait a second, I think I got that one wrong. That wasn't the scene they showed. So what was the scene they showed? Oh yes, now I remember. It was Littlefinger meeting with Lancel Lannister. So I wonder, why would they choose to show that scene? What possible relevance could it have in the episode to come? I suppose those who believe Lancel isn't the gift Littlefinger was referring to would have you believe that this scene bears no relevance to the show whatsoever, and they just decided to put it in the previously on segment just for shits and giggles. But as I previously explained, that completely goes against the entire purpose of the previously on segment, which is to only show scenes that are directly relevant to the episode about to air in order to prepare people for tonight's episode. Therefore, this segment did once again spoil something. It spoiled that Littlefinger would use Lancel in some way. So, some of you might be wondering, well, how did Littlefinger know about Lancel's prior dealings with Cersei? Did perhaps Lancel confess his sins to Littlefinger? That certainly wouldn't make any sense. And for those of you who may be wondering about this, I would like to remind you who Littlefinger is. Littlefinger is the man who orchestrated the assassination of a sitting king and effectively framed Tyrion for that murder in order to get his hands on Sansa Stark. And for that matter, Littlefinger is the man who put the whole premise of the entire show into motion by convincing Lysa to murder her husband and lead the Starks to believe it was the Lannisters that did it, which in fact sparked the entire War of the Five Kings. And Littlefinger is the man who constantly says this:
knowledge is power.
In other words, knowledge is his trade, and if you recall, the fact that Lancel was having an affair with Cersei was actually discovered in Season 2 by Tyrion.
Tell me, did Cersei have you knighted before or after she took you into her bed? What? Nothing to say? No more warnings for me, sir?
You will withdraw these filthy accusations.
Have you ever given any thought to what King Joffrey will have to say when he finds out you've been bedding his mother?
So, if Tyrion was able to find this out, you can bet your bottom dollar that Littlefinger knew about this, because Littlefinger knows about just about everything. And having met Lancel just before, and to see he's all buddy-buddy with the Faith Militant, he knows he'd be able to use him to pass this information along to the High Sparrow to have Cersei arrested. So I think I thoroughly pointed out that Lancel had not told the High Sparrow about the Cersei previously, and that Littlefinger would have the motivation and the means in which to use Lancel in order to strike back at Cersei. And since that is also what Lady Olenna wants, would be considered a gift to her. And moreover, getting back to the heart of the matter, the scene where Littlefinger and Lady Olenna plot to take down Cersei happens just before Cersei is in fact taken down. Those who proclaim Lancel wasn't the gift that Littlefinger was referring to will try to claim these two scenes are completely and utterly unrelated, and it's all just a huge coincidence. That reminds me of what a hero of mine once said:
I believe in coincidences. Coincidences happen every day. But I don't trust coincidences.
So I'm sorry to be blunt, but if you believe these two scenes are completely unrelated and it's all just a huge coincidence, then I have some oceanfront property in Arizona to sell you. So now that I've thoroughly addressed why Lancel Lannister is the gift that Littlefinger was referring to, let me move on to the other theories on who the gift was if it wasn't Lancel. Now, there are a number of theories going around on who this could be, but none are more popular or widely spoken of than the theory that Gendry was the gift that Littlefinger was referring to. So that's the only theory I will address, since it's the only one of consequence and the one that has a sizable amount of the fans, including the guy who created the fake plot leaks, which in turn got more people believing in this theory. So, other than the fact that I just proved it couldn't be anyone other than Lancel, let me now delve into why it specifically is not Gendry who Littlefinger was referring to as his gift to Lady Olenna. However, to be fair, since I showed all those scenes that supported that Lancel was the gift, let me now show all the scenes that support the theory that Gendry is the gift, including all the times that Gendry was mentioned in Season 5 of Game of Thrones. That's right, there is no evidence to support this theory whatsoever. And as far as I can tell, a fan who misunderstood who Littlefinger was referring to, that he was referring to Lancel, had a desire for Gendry to make a long-anticipated return to the show, so he pulled this theory directly from his ass, and it somehow caught on because many other people also strongly desired Gendry's return, and the theory did appear to make sense on a surface level. So let's explore beneath that surface, shall we? So the theory goes, Littlefinger will present Lady Olenna with Gendry so that she can use Gendry to prove that he is the son of Robert Baratheon, who bears no resemblance to Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella, thus proving they are the result of incest between Cersei and Jaime Lannister, and thus Cersei would be arrested and charged with that crime, and Tommen would be removed from the throne, and Gendry, who would at this stage be firmly in the grasp with Lady Olenna, would then be placed on the throne. Okay, so there are several major problems with this from the bat. First one is the assumption that Lady Olenna would want to dethrone Tommen, a theory that makes as much sense as Lady Olenna grabbing Joffrey's crossbow, aiming it directly at her foot and firing, because this is essentially what she'd be doing, shooting herself in the foot, as this represents a misunderstanding of what the Tyrells want and what their current position is, because they do not, in fact, desire to dethrone Tommen. Quite the contrary. They are, in fact, very pro-Tommen. They're just anti-Cersei. If only there was some way for them to get rid of Cersei without harming Tommen. Something having to do with her indiscretions, with not with Jaime, but with some other person, maybe a cousin of hers. Anyway, putting that aside, let me explain more on why the Tyrells are on Team Tommen. As we start Season 5, the Tyrells are in the exact position that they want to be in. Margaery is married to Tommen, making her the Queen of Westeros. For the moment, Cersei assumes some power because her son, the King, is still young and has yet to have an heir. But as soon as he does, Cersei's position would be considerably weakened, and Margaery would now be the mother of the prince, of the future king. And much in the same way that the Lannisters use Cersei's position as the queen and mother to the future kings to seize control of the throne, the Tyrells would now be in the position to do the same. In other words, the Lannisters' days of being in charge of the throne are numbered, and soon the throne will firmly be in the hands of the Tyrells. Their only claim is through a young, naive boy that Margaery has in the palm of her hands. So in other words, they are exactly where they want to be. Their problem presents themselves in Season 5 when Cersei refuses to let go of her power and tries to use trickery to have Margaery arrested. Thus, the Tyrells lose their hold over the crown. So, this popular theory supposes that the Tyrells intend to regain this power by getting rid of the one person who gave them the freaking power in the first place. This makes no sense whatsoever. What you have to understand is that without Tommen, the Tyrells have nothing. They lose any claim they might have to the throne. Margaery is no longer queen, and she has already consummated her marriage to Tommen, and for all they know, possibly could already be pregnant with Tommen's child. And if Tommen was declared a bastard, then his son would be considered a bastard as well. So instead of having the golden daughter of the Tyrells be the queen of the whole Seven Kingdoms and one day mother to the king, she would be trapped in a marriage to a bastard and the mother of a bastard possibly. Yeah, that makes total sense why Lady Olenna would want to do that. Now, I've had the privilege of talking to some people who strongly support this theory, and they have brought up some rationalizations on why the Tyrells would still want to delegitimize Tommen and put Gendry on the throne despite these issues that I have raised. Rationalization number 1 is Lady Olenna will marry Margaery to Gendry. So let's, at the moment, assume Margaery isn't pregnant with Tommen's child already, which is likely, to be fair. But she has consummated her marriage to Tommen, therefore cannot remarry in any significant way while Tommen lives. So it means, for this plan to work, it must also involve having Tommen killed. So, rationalization number 2, Lady Olenna wouldn't be afraid to kill Tommen because she, after all, killed Joffrey, which sounds like a fair point until you look at the details. In the case of Joffrey, he was a vicious monster who would treat Margaery like shit and had a tendency to be unpredictable and hard to control, and he had the virtue of having a younger brother ready to take over for him as soon as he died, a younger brother who was soft, docile, very easy to manipulate. So in other words, they killed Joffrey so they could get Tommen because he is easy to control and manipulate, where Joffrey was not. So then, what's the rationale on why they would kill Tommen? A king with absolutely no heirs, a king whose death would create a power vacuum. I think the argument that was put forth to me is so that they could get rid of the Lannisters entirely. Okay, so let's look at Robert Baratheon's marriage to Cersei. Cersei married a Baratheon, had children with her twin brother, and claimed they were Robert's. Eventually, Robert dies, and her children took over the throne. So let me ask you, how many Baratheons are currently hanging out in King's Landing? Try as I might, I can't think of a single one. So compare that to Margaery marrying Tommen, who is half Lannister. What do you think would happen eventually if the Lannisters manage to maneuver it so there are no longer any Baratheons in King's Landing? What's to stop the Tyrells from eventually doing the exact same thing to the Lannisters? In fact, that's kind of the whole point of Season 5. That's the whole point of Cersei making these power plays with the Faith Militant and going after Margaery and Loras, because she can see this coming and is desperate to prevent it and hold on to power. So from any objective viewpoint, the Tyrells already are on track to get rid of the Lannisters. Killing their only claim to the throne seems very counterproductive. Okay, now so let's look at Gendry. Gendry is a bastard with no claims on anything, let alone the Iron Throne. He is the bastard of King Robert Baratheon, so there's always the risk that someone will try to legitimize him in order to seize power, which is why Joffrey tried to have him killed. But still, that is a long shot. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that Lady Olenna kills Tommen so Margaery can marry Gendry and they can place Gendry on the throne. just how would they expect to do that? He's a bastard. Who's going to legitimize him? I suppose they could simply do it themselves and say, well, fuck it, we're legitimizing this bastard because he at least has Baratheon blood, unlike Tommen. Okay, fine. And if they're real lucky, all the other kingdoms would be perfectly okay with this, and if they're really lucky, they wouldn't start another massive war, and if they're really lucky, no one else would take control of the gigantic power vacuum that would occur by killing off the only legal heir to Robert Baratheon, and if they're really lucky, no one else would come up with a Harry the Heir type situation, where they find a distant relative who has a claim that some would say is greater than a legitimized bastard, or for that matter, someone else could come up with a legitimized bastard. If they're really lucky, people will accept the fact that Marjorie was married 4 times, the third of which she most definitely consummated her marriage on many occasions. In other words, this is a terrible, terrible plan without an ounce of certainty. Far more shaky than the position they're in with Tommen. And as I said, their position with Tommen is ideal. The only issue is Cersei, and this is why the Lancel thing is so perfect. It gets rid of Cersei while keeping Tommen, so the Tyrells are free to rule the throne without opposition. And when the High Sparrow asked Cersei about her affair with Jaime, she denied it, as of course she would, because she doesn't want to delegitimize her own son any more than the Tyrells do, so she plays right into their hands. So let's have a look overall at this theory that's put forth by many people. The theory goes that when High Sparrow arrested Cersei, this was completely unrelated to Littlefinger and Lady Olenna's planning, because Lancel had already went to the High Sparrow about this ages ago, even though there's absolutely zero evidence in the show to support this, and it's all just one huge happy coincidence that the High Sparrow just so happens to decide to move on Cersei at the exact time Littlefinger and Lady Olenna were planning her downfall. And it's a huge and happy coincidence that his actions just so happen to play perfectly into the Tyrells' interests. And the High Sparrow just sat on this information and waited until Cersei gave him more power before he moved on her, even though every bit of information we have on the High Sparrow says that this goes completely against his character. And instead, Littlefinger plans on giving Gendry over to Lady Olenna so she can kill Tommen, the one secure legal hold to the throne that the Tyrells have, so that Marjorie, who has already consummated her marriage, can marry this other bastard that they will try to legitimize, and if they're really lucky, they can put him on the throne without starting an even larger war in order to get into a position that isn't nearly as strong as the position that they are already in. So, that's one possibility. The other possibility is that Littlefinger meant Lancel was her guest, so she could use him to arrest Cersei while keeping Tommen, and assuming they can eventually free Marjorie, they would eventually be free to control and manipulate the crown, and to have this young boy who's easily manipulative without any more interference from Cersei. So I ask you, which possibility is more likely? I'm sure that I have thoroughly proven that there is only one possibility. The other is a flawed theory based on misconceptions that have more holes in it than Swiss cheese, supported by absolutely nothing, just some fandom wishful thinking to see Gendry return. So that's it for my video on why Lancel is Littlefinger's gift to Lady Olenna. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my channel for many more Game of Thrones videos, as I try to put out at least one a week, and many other videos on shows like Star Trek, The Walking Dead, Better Call Saul, and Vikings. And please make sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.